What's up guys, Justin here with TheSketchUpEssentials.com, back with another SketchUp layout tutorial for you. In this video we're going to use SketchUp 2018's new sectioning tools in order to create a floor plan and layout. Before I get started, I do want to take a second and thank my supporters on Patreon. As you know, Patreon is the website where you can support YouTube creators that you like, so if you're interested in supporting the show, you like what I'm doing here, make sure you check out that link in the notes below. Also, there's also some links to some different resources, a few different books and other things for layout, so if you want to get a little further into layout, make sure you check out those links in the notes as well. So let's go ahead and just jump into it. Alright, so for those of you that have been following along, you know that we've got our apartment model that we've been working on, and we've got everything kind of grouped in a certain way, so all the furniture, all the cabinets, all the plumbing fixtures, all that different stuff is in different groups, all the doors, the exterior walls, and they're also layered so we can turn everything on and off. And in the last video, we created a tab for just an overall floor plan, and it was very simple. All it really did was we just took a section cut through our walls, and we turned perspective off so that we had a straight up and down view. So that's all we did, and then we took this and we exported it to layout, which is fine. That works okay if that's all you want to generate. In this case, what we want to do though is we actually want to generate a plan that shows the exterior walls separate from the interior walls because they're shaded differently. And we also want to take some of these colors out and make the line weights a little thinner. So just kind of make some different changes so that our plans look a little bit better. And so what we're going to do is the way that we have to do this in layout, because you can only have one style active at a time, is we have to create a scene for our interior walls, for our exterior walls, and then for everything else so that we can apply the right fills. And this actually did get a lot easier with SketchUp 2018. And let me go ahead and explain. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a scene showing only my exterior walls. So in order to do that, if you remember, we've come in here and we've put everything on layers. So all we're going to do is I'm just going to select this first object, and then I'm going to do a shift click and click on the last object, and then I'm going to do a control click on the exterior walls. So basically what I did is I selected everything in that list, and then I deselected the exterior walls object, and now I'm going to click the little check mark. And so you can see when I do that, when I click the check mark, everything that was selected gets turned off. So now I have a view that's just showing my exterior walls here in my model. So that's kind of our first step, is we want a view that just shows our exterior walls. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take a section cut through these walls. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that inside of my exterior walls group, and there's a reason for that I'll talk about in just a second. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to double click inside our exterior walls group, and you can see how now I'm in this group with all this individual geometry. So that's our group that's inside this exterior walls layer right here. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add a section plane. And this is where you're going to notice the first change that happened in SketchUp 2018. The first change that happened in 2018 is they added this option to name and give a symbol to your section planes, which is a really cool feature, by the way. It's very useful. And so what we're going to do in this case is we're going to call this one exterior wall section. And it also asks for a symbol, and the symbol is what's going to show up on the screen in the little circles next to the section plane. So in this case, I'm just going to call this EWS for exterior wall symbols. And I'm going to click place. And then we're going to do what we always do, which is just place our section plane in our model. And so the first thing I did there is I tapped the up key to lock this to an axis. And so you can see if I tap the left or the right keys, this will lock to different axes. We want to tap the up key to lock it to the blue axis. And then I'm just going to click in order to place this. And so a couple things that I want to note real quick. The first thing I want to note is now with my section plane, you can see how it shows up with these symbols on the end. And this is the abbreviation that I set. So you see how I typed in EWS? Well, now this gets included as EWS in my model. And so I have a section cut through here. And for right now, the other thing I want to note is this goes inside this exterior wall layer. So, well, and that's the other thing I want to know is now these actually show up in your outliner. And so when they show up in your outliner, they actually have a name so you can see what they do. And you can put these inside of a group. So now when I turn off my exterior walls, that section goes away too because it's inside that group. That's why we want to put it in that group so that it's not cluttering everything up, because literally we are only going to use this to take a section through the exterior walls. And so you'll see this other section that I had in here, and I'm actually going to delete that one out for right now. No, I'm just going to right click on it and I'm going to hide it. And so you can see that was the first thing that's changed, is now you can organize these like that. The second thing that's changed is you can actually add fills in your walls now. You can't add hatching, but you can add color fills using the styles section. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go to the styles section of our tray, and we're going to select, in this case, let's select the hidden line option. So that's a style that we want to put in here, and you can see how it has a white background and your edges are kind of a light color. And the other thing you'll note is inside this wall there's actually a fill for this section cut. And you can adjust your fill for your section cut by going over to your modeling settings, and you can look in here and you can see there's now an option for section fill and section lines. And there's also an option for section line width. So let's look at that real quick. So let's say, for example, I set my section fill on these walls to white. You can see how that fill changed, and now there's a line on the exterior of my wall. And so that line thickness is set by this box right here. So if I set that to 1, I'm going to get a really thin line. If I set that to 10, I'm going to get a super thick line. And so you can adjust the way that those lines look in your style section. And so that's kind of the first thing, is it doesn't necessarily matter for this one, but we're going to use that for our interior walls. But what I want to do is I want to go ahead and I want to make this a new style. And so I'm just going to click on this, and I'm going to click the plus, and I'm just going to call this hidden line exterior walls. And that's just to keep everything organized. And you can see how I clicked on this button right here to update that once I made my change. And so now we can go ahead, we can set our section fill to black, hit OK, and then update this again. And now we're going to give this a top-down view, and we're going to turn perspective off. Then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the axes off, which you can also adjust over here in your settings under this blue box right here. So I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to check the box for model axes. And so when I do that, you can see how my model axes go away. And so I'm going to click the zoom extents button to center this on my screen. And you can see what I've got is I've got a section cut that's not showing the door or window in these openings. It's just kind of got an opening in here. And you can see how this doesn't fill in because the section cut isn't actually cutting through this right here. So the fact that I took this through the middle means that this doesn't fill in. That's what allows us to have this dark fill around the edge, but not in our window opening. And so we'll go ahead and zoom extents, and then what we're going to do is we're going to create a new scene for this. So we're just going to right click and we're going to click add scene. And before I do that, I forgot to update this after I made my axis change. So click on this, then come up here, right click and click add scene. And you can see what this does is this adds a scene called scene 3. Well, what we want to do is we actually want to go into our scene section and we want to name this. And so the scene section is a section in your tray where you can manage all your different scenes. You can move them up and down by clicking these arrows. Well, what we want to do in this case is we want to call this exterior walls shaded. Or if you're going to use a lot of these, you may want to call that something different. So you may want to call it like EW, something abbreviated, because you can get a whole lot of tabs in here. So that's just kind of something that you're going to use. So it's all for you. It's not for anyone else. So however you organize things, go ahead and label that way. And so what we have is we have this view kind of top down that shows our exterior walls, and they're shaded this dark black color. Well, now we're going to create another scene for our interior walls, because what we're going to do is we're going to stack these on top of each other in layout to generate our view. So I'm going to turn my exterior walls off, and I'm going to turn my interior walls on. The first thing you're going to note in here is that we don't have a section cut in these walls, so nothing's shaded right now. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a new scene. while I'm in this camera view. And the only reason I'm doing that is because if I take these all from the same camera view, it's just a little easier to deal with in layout. It's not a big deal. But now I've created this scene 4, we'll go ahead and call this interior walls shaded. Well, now I can fly around in here, and then if I want to go back, all I have to do is click on that, and my camera's already set. And so what we're going to do in this case is I'm going to double click inside again, just like we did before. We're going to add a new section cut, and we're going to call this just something like interior wall section. We'll just call it IWS. And we're going to click place. And you're going to note if I set this up above kind of high, it's not actually cutting through these walls down here. So you want to take a look at your model and make sure that you're setting this low enough that it's actually cutting through all the walls. So you can see how all I did is I took the move tool and I just moved the section plane up and down. So if I move it up above everything, it's not cutting anything. And you can see how as I move it down, I can see that it's now cutting through these walls. And so we'll go back to our top-down view, and we're going to have to make some quick changes to our this. So the first thing we need to do is that section plane is in there, but it's not set as active. And so we're just going to double click inside that section, and we're just going to right click, and we're going to check the box for active cut. And I think when I click on this, it'll deactivate it. So instead, what we're going to do is we'll just go to view, we'll show our section planes, and we'll select that plane, and we'll right click on it and click active cut. And then we'll update our interior walls shaded option. And let's make a couple more changes while we're in here working on this. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and create a new style. And we're going to call this one hidden line interior walls. And we'll go ahead and click this update button. And so the first thing we're going to do is we'll turn off section planes, and we're going to adjust our section fill to a different color. And so you can do that but just by clicking on this little box, and then I'm just going to click and drag this up until it's more of a gray color, and I'm going to click OK. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my section lines, let's leave it at 3 for right now. I'm good with that. And so now we're going to go ahead and click the update style button, and then we'll right click and we'll do an update of our scene. And so now what we have is we have a scene with our interior walls with this gray shading and these black section lines, and then we've got a scene with our exterior walls that are this black color. So we have two different scenes showing those two different things. So, and then the last thing we want to do is we want to create one more scene that shows all of our furniture and basically everything else in our model. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and turn everything on, and then I'm going to turn off my interior walls and my exterior walls. And in this case, what we want is we're actually going to go in and we're just going to select the regular hidden line style in here. And we're going to have to make a single change in here, which is if you look inside your model, you've got some chairs and some other things in here that don't show up very well. And the reason for that is because the hidden line style doesn't have profiles enabled. So it shows edges, but it doesn't show profiles. And so when it does that, things like these chairs, which are really curved and kind of organic, a lot of those curved faces don't show up very well. So what we want to do is we want to check the box for profiles. And we can go ahead and make this a new style if we want. So in this case, I'll call this hidden line furniture, and I'll update it. So now I have a view that shows all my furniture and all my cabinets and that sort of thing as hidden line style as well. And so then we'll just right click and we'll add one more scene. And we'll just go in and we'll call this furniture, etc. You can really call it whatever you want to call it. But so now what we have is we have our three different layers in here. We have a layer that shows our exterior walls shaded, a layer that shows our interior walls shaded, And then we have a layer that shows all of our furniture and everything else. So now what we want to do is we want to save our model. So go in, do a file, and do a save. And then we're going to go over into layout. And so there's two ways you can do that. You can either go to file and click send to layout, or you can go over to layout and you can set up a title block that you like. So like, for example, if I wanted to do like an architectural D landscape, you can set up a title block that you like, and then you can just do a file, insert, and you're going to select your model. So in this case, I'm going to select my apartment part 5 model. And you can see how what that does is that brings in usually whatever the current scene was when you saved your model. And so if you go up to the SketchUp model section, you can set your scenes and your views and your scale. So you can see how if I click this drop down for scenes, I can find my exterior walls, my interior walls, and my furniture. And so the first thing we're going to do is we can go ahead and leave our furniture layer. That works fine for me for right now. And we're just going to set our scale. I'm probably going to set it to this 1/2 inch scale. And then I'm going to make sure this box is checked. You want it to preserve the scale on resize. Otherwise, it'll resize your model to something that isn't the scale that you wanted. And so I'm going to go ahead and resize this so that it shows everything. And I'm just going to kind of put it in place. So wherever I want it on the screen, I'm going to go ahead and put it over there. And the other thing I'm probably going to do is I'm going to put this group that I brought in on a layer. So in this case, I'm just going to click this plus button. And this is just kind of a personal preference thing. But I'm going to go ahead and call this furniture, etc. And then I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to click move to layer, furniture, etc. That way, I can turn that layer on and off if I want to. So if I'm fiddling around with my walls and I need to look at those a little bit better, you can do that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and I'm going to click copy. And I think you can actually hold the control key to make a copy of this as well. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and click paste. And it's just going to paste another copy of this viewport on top of that first one. So you can see how if I kind of move it off to the right hand side there, I have 2 copies of this viewport. Well, now what we're going to do with that one selected is we're actually going to go down and we're going to select our exterior walls shaded scene. And so you can see how that brings in my scene for my exterior walls. And we can go ahead and put that on a layer as well. So we can call that exterior walls. And we can right click and we can click move to layer exterior walls. So then I can turn that on and off as well. All right, so one thing I want to note in here is the way these are stacked shouldn't make a difference unless you have backgrounds turned on. And so what that means is, like, if I bring in this exterior walls and I put it on the top layer, that's the top thing layout's going to show. Well, if I'm editing that and this box for background is checked in your styles, then it's not going to allow this other stuff to show through. So you want to make sure this box for background isn't checked when you bring this in. So, I mean, it's a fairly easy thing to do, but it can get really confusing if you don't do it. So that's just one thing to look out for. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're just going to go to copy and we're going to right click and we're going to paste one more layer in here. And so what that's going to do is that's going to drop another layer on top of here. In this case, I probably copied my exterior walls. Well, all we want to do is we want to set the view for that one to interior walls shaded. And so what that's going to do is that's going to bring in those interior walls. And we can go ahead and put that on a layer as well. So we'll just call this interior walls. And sometimes what I do actually is I'll label these walls interior because I like to group things by name. It just gets a little easier to manage everything. So instead of having interior and exterior walls, we'll just do walls exterior. And again, it's a preference thing. It probably doesn't matter, but that's just kind of the way that I do that. And one thing to note is on some of these, if you have these set, like your interior walls, for example, so I'm going to select this interior walls layer and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set that to vector. And what that's going to do is that's going to give me a message saying it's good for line drawings, but it can't represent styles. So when you do things by vector, what it's going to do is it's going to render your line weights a lot better. So if you look at this layer right here, for example, these are all in here as raster, which are great for showing different styles and that sort of thing, but it doesn't necessarily render your line weights smoothly. But for right now, we can probably leave it on raster just because when you zoom out, everything looks kind of smooth. And the reason, so there's three different things in here. There's vector, which is good for line weights, raster is good for styles, and then hybrid will do both, but it takes a lot longer to render. So what you could do is you could come into your furniture, etc. layer and set this all to vector for better line weights. Or if you have colors and styles and that sort of thing, you can set it to hybrid. So you can see how those immediately got more clear and more smooth. So if you're doing something with just lines, you probably want to go ahead and set that as vector, not as raster. But like for example, if I was to come in and adjust my interior walls shaded style to have thicker line weights, so like if I brought those in as like a 5 and I updated this, and I right-clicked and I updated my interior walls shaded, I could do a save over in SketchUp, and then all I would do is I would do a right-click and I would update my model reference, and that would bring in the change that I made to my line weights over here. So you can adjust those views after you've got them all set up, so you can see how these line weights got darker. So this is something that you can go back and you can adjust after the fact by adjusting things in your SketchUp model. If you set everything up properly, then it's really easy to make changes and make things look a lot better. So that's where I'm going to wrap up today's video. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you thought. Do you like the new features in SketchUp 2018? I just love having that SketchUp conversation with you guys. If you like this video, please remember to click that like button down below. If you're new around here, remember to click that subscribe button for new SketchUp content every week. If you like what I'm doing in this channel, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Every little bit helps, even if it's only $1 a month. But in any case, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. I really appreciate it, and I will catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.